Hello and welcome. I'm Elias, driver and engineer from the team Red Bull Driftbrothers, and as you can see I'm still smiling when I think about the 1000 horsepower that the BMW S58 engine has done on the dyno from Track Day Performance from Robbie. So yeah, it's just amazing what we all achieved there. So again, thanks to Robbie from Track Day Performance, thanks to BMW M for all the support, and thanks to Gabriel, Oliviero, Alessandro and Vincenzo for making this happen in such a short amount of time. So but now let's jump right into the questions and see what the people want to know. So starting with Shane Libbert. Does the transmission stand up to those power and torque levels? Very good question. I would say the standard, the stock transmission that you also can get for the new BMW M4 and M3 manual probably won't do it long, but we're not using that for our drift cars. We're using actually the RS90 box from Samsonas. We're working with them already for 6 years, I think, was the first time we had a Samsonas box in our cars, and we are super happy. The RS90 is their latest product. Before we used they called it universal sequential gearbox with 6 gears. Now we jumped to 5 gears, as normally in competition use we never had to use the 6 gear. 5 gears are enough for everything we've done so far, and it allows for having stronger gears in. So yeah, the toughness of that gearbox needs to be there, and they say it's good up to about 1500 or 1600 Newton meters of torque. So that's quite a lot. We won't exceed that. And yeah, so far with our old cars that also had with the nitrous already 1000 Newton meters, we checked it regularly, but we never had like bad failure or anything smashing. So we are quite confident that this box can handle the torque and the power of the S58 engine. Moving on, Khalid Erod. What exactly has been done to the head geometry? I probably can't tell you all about that, but most of it. So what we've done, we basically got quite some material out of the head to reduce the compression ratio. So for people that don't know what the compression ratio is, if you have your piston is moving up and down in your cylinder, and there's a maximum volume when the piston is at its lowest position, and there's a minimum volume if the piston is at its highest position. And if you divide these two volumes by each other, you get the compression ratio. So for normally aspirated engines, that's in a region of 10 to 1. So when the piston is low, it's 10, the volume is 10. If it's up, it's 1. For like super high compression engines, naturally aspirated, it goes up to 13 or even 14 to 1. So the volume in the top gets smaller, or the maximum volume gets bigger. And for most of the time, for turbo applications, for forced induction engines, the compression ratio goes down a bit. And we started at 9.3 to 1 from BMW factory, and we reduced it quite a bit in the region of 8.5 to 1. With that measure, we can use the 102 fuel that we used. So we haven't used ethanol or any fancy race fuel. With lowering the compression ratio, you are able to use, let's say, less, quality is the wrong word, but not so fancy fuel, and the engine still runs fine and produces a lot of power. So this is one thing. And another thing is that we wanted to increase the flow. If you get more air into your combustion chamber, you can add more fuel and you get out more power. So that's why we were looking at how we can increase the flow that goes into the combustion chamber, and BMW already has done a great job there. However, they have also other aspects in their mind. So for them it's really important that the engine also runs fine in part throttle, and for us it's not that big of a deal if the engine runs a bit rough when it's like 2000 RPM or something like that. Also the fuel consumption is one thing that BMW M has to look out for, and that's why they had different measures in their head geometry for that reason. However, these measures, they don't allow for the maximum horsepower output, and that was our goal. So that's why we tried to adjust these measures, or even eroded them, to basically get the high horsepower numbers and basically a good behaving engine on high RPM, high throttle loads. And so I hope that answers your question, and we go to the next one. Twan Unknown. Thanks again for doing this in English, very much appreciated. Yeah, I do my best. What was the reason to stick with direct injection and not fully convert to port injection. Like for example, Papadakis Racing did. Does the lift pump from the fuel cell deliver fuel directly to the high pressure direct injection pumps? Very curious about this last question because I'm looking into a new, not S58 engine for my drift car that also has direct injection, but no idea how to hook up the fuel system. Sorry for my long reply. No problem, when it gets technical, it quickly starts to get difficult. So starting at the top, what was the reason to stick with the direct injection and not convert it fully to port injection? There are, let's say, benefits or advantages of each system. The direct fuel injection is very precise. You can really control how much fuel you have in the combustion chamber. You can even inject multiple times over one stroke of the engine, and all these benefits you only have with the direct injection. The benefits of the port injection are you basically bring the fuel in way earlier, so you bring it in the runner, so before it enters the combustion chamber, so it has more time to mix with the air, and it also cools down the intake valve and lubricates the intake valve. That is also a very good thing. The other point is, with the horsepower numbers we're talking here, the port, I mean, there are injectors out there that can do that. Probably we would end up with having 2 times or 2 injectors per runner, per cylinder. So we would have 12 fuel injectors, like port fuel injectors, to reach these numbers, these power numbers, and that's also very complicated. And as the system from the S58 was already, I mean, it's perfectly engineered and there, we said, okay, let's use this one. Let's see where is the max of that system, and then add port injection, reach our goals. And in my eyes, this approach has worked out really well. As you already have seen and witnessed, the numbers are incredible, the curve is incredible. I'm really looking forward to drive the car finally, to drive this engine in the car. But yeah, I have to be a bit patient here. So let's move on in your question. If the lift pump feeds directly to the high pressure pump of the direct injection, yes, it's like that. So the original fuel pressure, feed fuel pressure for the direct injection system is at 5 bars. So that's quite a common pressure, I would say. So you basically feed the direct injection with 5 bar continuous fuel flow, and the rest is done in the high pressure pump. This was it. So to feed the high pressure, it's not a big deal. However, to control the direct injection system with the aftermarket ECU was quite challenging, at least for us. I don't know what's your plans here, but you probably know what you want to do. Next question, Luca Giraud. He's actually asking in German, so I read that in German. Hey Drift Brothers, ich weiß nicht, ob es erlaubt ist, aber ihr könnt doch ein Trockeneissystem einbauen. Also mit einem Trockeneistank im Wärmetauscherkreislauf und so weiter, dann habt ihr einen sehr kühlen Motor. Eine andere Möglichkeit wäre eine Icebox. Freundliche Grüße. Thanks Luca for this input. Luca was suggesting that we use a dry ice system to cool down the engine. So we also thought about opportunities to do that. So there are different things. So you either could cool the cooling water, but this is probably quite hard on the engine. The other one would be the charge cooling system. We have a water-cooled charge cooling system, and there we could cool down the water really low. For example, also with dry ice. Our approach here was we would like to have a car that basically only needs fuel to run. That's why we designed the cooling system quite large, and we hope that we never get in a situation where we need to spray water on our radiators or having to use dry ice, because the trick part is always it works when you have the dry ice, but how do you get the dry ice to the racetrack? How do you keep it cold there? Who is handling it? And that's why we wanted to have like a car that works with less, let's say, hands on it. That's why we first wanted to use a system without that. However, for really hot countries and hot days, this might be an option that we have to take into account. So thank you very much for that question. Next question, Pauli Lee. Wenn man sich bei 1539 das Diagramm anschaut und realisiert, dass bei 3000 Umdrehungen pro Minute schon 1000 Newtonmeter anliegen, Dieser Motor ist eine Revolution im Tuning-Motorsport-Bereich. Yeah, just look closely at it, and at 3,500 RPM there are already 1,000 Newton meters. So he says that's a revolution for tuning and motorsport, and in my eyes, yeah, it is. That's the amazing thing of this S58 engine, and still having it twin turbocharged. Normally with a, for example, JC engine with a big single turbo, the torque develops way later in the ref range and way more like rapid, let's say this. And this curve looks really smooth, and it has a really long band that you can use. So as I said before, I'm so looking forward to drive this engine in a car, in a real car. Yeah, from this diagram, it looks amazing. Let's see how it works out in the car. Thank you for your input here. Another question, don't ask why. Good name. Hat euer Tester auch Erfahrungen mit dem B58 Motor, der im M340i ist? Wie es bei dem mit der Standfestigkeit ausschaut? So he's asking if our tuner Robbie also has experiences with the B58 engine. So that's the, let's call it the BMW AG engine that is, for example, in an M340i, and how robust or how reliable this engine is. So Robbie hasn't had a B58 engine in his hands yet, but there's a lot of tuning going on with the B58 engine already, because this engine is way longer on the market than the S58 engine. What I can say, between the S58 and the B58, there's not only one letter difference, there's about 80 to 90% of the parts are different. So the bore to stroke ratio is already different, the head is completely different, the crankcase is different, so almost any part is changed from the B58 to the S58. However, the B58 is also a really good engine and has a lot of tuning capacity. So there are, for example, MPS from Germany. They are working on a Supra quite a long time already, and I think they are on their way to making also 1,000 horsepower with the B58 engine. So there's also quite a lot of things out there, or probably the most popular, Papadakis Racing in the US. They built the drift car of Frederick Osbo. They reached 1,000 horsepower with this engine as well. However, they changed like almost everything on the engine. The pistons, the rods, they used the same crankshaft. They modified the head as well. They put it back on port injection and put a huge turbo on it. So I think the block is also strong enough, the block and the crank probably. The pistons and the connecting rods, I think they probably are limiting the power at a certain level. I can't tell by now, but I'm guessing around 700 to 800 Newton horsepower. So this is just a rough estimation from my side. I personally also don't have personal experience with this engine, but I saw that many people are tuning this engine and it has a great capability. So last question for today, Philipp Schüller, probably the 2JC of the future. I think this is a good question to end this one. Exactly. I mean, now the engine is brand new. There's not too much knowledge about it, not too much parts available for it, but this will change over the next couple months, years, and we are already super happy that we've been involved right from the get-go with this engine, and we see exactly what you just said, a really great engine for the future, and I think many motorsports application will use this engine in future. So thank you very much for all the input, all the thoughts and all the comments that you've done to our videos. We are keeping pushing that we get the engines finally in the cars and the cars ready and everything to be able to go out hopefully very soon and see how all that performs in a real world condition on a drift track. So I'm really looking for that day. So thanks again and see you next time.